The Other Side of the Fence by Elissa Skinner. Chapter 5. The Skinners felt tired, but had to get up. Ethan yawned as he drank from his blue sippy cup. The weekend was fun, but they were worn out, which made little boys slow and mothers shout. Then all were surprised by a knock on the door. Mrs. Skinner felt she could take no more. She stormed off to see who was making the noise. It was two little boys clutching their toys. "Hi, Reuben and Jessie," she said politely. The boys blinked their eyes and smiled brightly. Reuben said shyly, "Ethan, come play." Mrs. Skinner melted and rushed away. She called over her shoulder, "Stay put, boys. Feel free to sit down and play with some toys." To her husband she said, "I hope you won't fuss. I need you to get the big boys on the bus. Reuben and Jessie have wandered in here. I must take them back before they disappear." Then she bundled up Ethan and ran down the hall where Reuben and Jessie were rolling a ball. They led her to the garden as she followed behind, which was just what Mrs. Lovejoy had in mind. When they arrived, Mrs. Lovejoy said, "I'd like a hand in the garden bed." "I had a feeling you couldn't resist two bubbas giving your arm a twist. Anyway, I really think it's my turn. I can do many things. Are you willing to learn?" Mrs. Skinner just nodded, but she was confused. The Lovejoys, however, just looked amused. "Come on through, it's time for yoga. Are your clothes comfy? Can I offer a toga?" Mrs. Skinner replied, "I think I'll be fine," as they walked out the front past the passion fruit vine. The neighbours now covered the whole front lawn to relax and do yoga and feel reborn. Even the children joined in for a while, until they got wobbly and fell in a pile. They couldn't stay long or they'd miss the bus, and they had important kid things to discuss. Mrs. Lovejoy spoke softly, saying all the right things to remove all the stress that life sometimes brings. Things like breathe in the air and expel any fear. It'll make you feel light and your mind will be clear. She also spoke about finding your centre, to make room for peace and goodwill to enter. Mrs. Skinner wasn't quite sure what she meant, but she did feel relaxed as she stretched and bent. Poor Ethan, however, was not having fun, stuck with 3-year-old Reuben and Jessie, aged 1. He liked being youngest of 3 Skinner boys. If he started crying, he got all the toys. But these new guys were wise to all of his tricks, and there weren't any toys, just rocks, leaves, and sticks. So he sat by himself and turned away, hoping his mummy would soon come and play. When the class was over, he started to grin. His mum picked him up and kissed his soft skin. Then before she could leave, Mrs. Lovejoy begged, "Can you help me get my bird nets unpegged? It's time to pick fruit to sell at the stall this weekend at the local community hall." Mrs. Skinner replied, "I really must go. Ethan needs his nap, don't you know?" "Please, Mrs. Skinner," Mrs. Lovejoy pleaded, "your presence here is greatly needed. Ethan can sleep here curled up with the cat. I know my kids enjoy doing that." Mrs. Skinner just shrugged. She was out of excuses. Mrs. Lovejoy droned on about herbs and their uses. They put on gloves and picked fruit trees, dug up potatoes and got dirt on their knees. The young boys helped too, but mostly they played, except for Ethan, who was mad that they'd stayed. When the work was done, she let Ethan rest on a couch with a blanket, but he was still dressed. He sulked for a bit until he fell asleep, warm and cozy, curled up in a heap. It didn't take long for the cat to join in. She found a good spot up close to his skin. While little boys slept, the mothers drank tea and talked about painting, massage, and Tai Chi. Then Mrs. Lovejoy got out tarot cards, while they ate pointy peanut brittle shards. Mrs. Skinner asked, "What do these cards do? I've seen them before, but I don't have a clue." "They're a guide to the future," Mrs. Lovejoy said, "and they can be fun if properly read. We'll start with a simple 3-card spread. As we both know, kids don't stay long in bed. This first card shows that your mind was once cloudy. The second shows peace now that your life is more rowdy. The third one is special, giving future advice. Embracing new things will make your life nice." "Wow, you're good," Mrs. Skinner praised. "I've tried making changes from how I was raised. I'm not sure what it is about this new place, but I welcome the future we Skinners will face." Then out of the silence came a scream, and a thump. The poor cat had been startled and left with a jump. Ethan was thrashing his arms in disgust because big furry animals seemed hard to trust. He threw himself down upon the floor until he was carried out the front door. Mr. Skinner got home and was instantly rushed into his yard clothes all dirty and crushed. Mr. Lovejoy needs help, his wife announced. She'd seen him arrive, then cat-like she'd pounced. He just wanted 5 minutes all to himself. No chatter, no jobs, just time with oneself. However, today didn't work out like that, so he shuffled next door with his gloves and his hat. The place was full of interesting stuff, wind chimes, statues, and 4 kids who were tough. They played in the backyard without any shoes, eating snacks from the garden whenever they choose. Then he noticed Mr. Lovejoy's skinny long legs sticking out from the chicken coop as he pulled out the eggs. Is this a bad time?" asked Mr. Skinner. "I can come back after you've had your dinner." Mr. Lovejoy crawled out and brushed off his knees. Then he said, "Can you help me now, please? You see, there's a leak in my water tank, and my wife would be mad if our house one day sank." Both of them chuckled and started to look. They also got help from a runaway chook. Then they patched the tank as best they could with welded steel and bits of old wood. "That should do," Mr. Lovejoy declared. Then he chased down the chicken, who seemed a bit scared. Mr. Lovejoy was full of praise for his friend, who now moved slowly and couldn't bend. "Oh no, you're hurt," Mr. Lovejoy cried. "My wife could fix that with ease if she tried. I insist you come in for a soothing massage. Just lay down in there near the paints and collage. This is her art room, so excuse the mess. With 4 kids it helps to reduce her stress." Mrs. Lovejoy came in and gave a big smile and said, "I only get stressed once in a while. Husband tells me you've injured your back. I'll give it a rub and add the heat pack." They happily chatted away while she worked, while 4 sneaky kids listened and lurked. Mr. Skinner got sleepy and hobbled off home. He felt lazy and tripped on a garden gnome. His dinner was ready and smelled so nice. It was homegrown veggies and wild brown rice. The week was relaxing and time slowed down. They were starting to really enjoy their hometown. Well, almost all of the Skinners were, but no one asked Ethan what he would prefer. His mother just thought he was feeling grumpy because he had new teeth and his gums were all lumpy, but that wasn't it. He just didn't like change, and he thought getting dirty was yucky and strange. The last straw was when she helped at the stall all weekend at the community hall. Everyone came to see what was new, or perhaps something old that someone outgrew. The big kids explored the large park and gardens, while he was stuck listening to how soap hardens. He was once again paired up with little Jessie, who ate everything and was sticky and messy. Jess couldn't talk much, but neither could he. Ethan managed to say, "Don't sit next to me." This made Jessie cry, and he ran to his mum. Time out for Ethan, who sat sucking his thumb. Ethan watched as his mum made soap on the spot. It looked hot and gloopy, but she liked it a lot. So did the people who crowded around to see how the soap was pressed and bound. He couldn't believe it came out the right shape, and they all smelled of fruits like pear or grape. By the end of day 2, they'd almost sold it all. There were also less people at the fruit and veg stall. So they packed up the boxes of soap, veg, and fruit to be taken back home in the old blue ute. Mr. Lovejoy called out before they drove away, "Thank you, Skinners, for all your help today. We insist you come for tonight's celebrations, where we praise the new moon and the constellations." With a wave he drove off, so the plan had been set. This news made Ethan even more upset. The Skinners went home to get changed and washed. Ethan had sat in some fruit that got squashed. Mum packed their picnic basket and rug, then wrapped Ethan up tightly, all warm and snug. They followed the noises down to the park, where they would be eating and playing till dark. The kids flew kites, which got stuck in the trees, howled at the moon and got dirt on their knees. All the noise meant Ethan could not sleep, and he was too young to be counting sheep. So he had to get up and join the kids' group, who were now doing tricks with a hula hoop. "Ethan," called Sailor, "please come and play. I've hardly seen you at all today. He stomped his foot and gave his best scowl, and then started to screech like a cranky old owl. "I can't understand him," Tux said with a shrug. "Do you think he's been bit by a snake or a bug?" "That isn't it. He's angry," said Will. "His face is all red and his voice is shrill. I can try to interpret, so pretend I am him, but I don't think you'll like it. He's feeling quite grim. He said, 'You're too loud and I'm trying to snooze. I hate this new life. It is not what I choose. My mum's busy gardening or painting her toes, and now she wears a ring through her nose. I've been playing all week with Reuben and Jessie, but I think Play-Doh and paints are too messy. My mum even laughed when I sat and squashed fruit, which made sticky marks on my favourite white suit. I hate gardening, painting, and digging for clues. My feet are still hurting from wearing no shoes. When I asked Mum to look at my blister, she asked me would I like a new sister. It's not just Mum. Dad's gone mad too. He built garden beds to grow food like you. He thinks we should stop watching TV shows and instead play weird games on tippy toes. I hate all these changes. I want to go home. I don't need more space where I can roam." As soon as Will finished, Ethan calmed down. He stopped thrashing his arms but still wore a frown. Jack said, "Did he really say all that? You must speak monkey, or is it fruit bat?" That was enough to make Ethan shout. Soon the parents would ask what it was about. So Sailor stepped in to make Ethan see how wonderful change and new friends can be. She moved closer to him and looked in his eyes, ignoring his temper and ear-splitting cries, and she said softly, "I know how you feel. When my family moved here, it made me squeal. I used to enjoy playing the baby like you, but growing up can be loads of fun too. At least you have brothers to help you through. I was alone with a different worldview. You see, back then, I was the only child, and I liked it that way and grew spoilt and wild. Then after a while things fell into place, and I welcomed the changes in each brand new face. It really is a great place to grow, so please stick to the plan and go with the flow." Sailor gave him a hug, which he didn't refuse. Then he laid in her lap and started to snooze. The parents had started to clean up the food, and soon they would come to collect their brood, so Will thought it best to plan the next part before it was time for them all to depart. He asked, "Hey guys, what's the rest of the plan? Should we have more kids and buy a bigger van? Tell me, please, it won't spoil the surprise." But they all just stared back with unblinking eyes. Finally, Ruby began to speak, saying, "This is your life, and you pick its peak." "Did we do something wrong?" Will replied. "I don't understand. We all really tried." "You're not in trouble," Ruby consoled, "but your future plan is for you to unfold. It was only our job to give you a hand and open your eyes to your new homeland. No one can tell you who you want to be, what you should like, or what makes you feel free. Now is your chance to make things feel right. Life's like an apple, so go take a bite." Will still looked confused, but they all had to go. It was getting cold and the moon was aglow. So they said their goodbyes and went off home to have sleepy dreams on pillows of foam. The end.